The text message lit up my phone, and the words just punched me in the gut. It was from my son, Mark, but I just knew, those words weren't really his. "You're not invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." Just like that. Years of love and sacrifice, just wiped away in a few cold words. My heart just shattered. But then, underneath all that pain, something else started bubbling up, pure anger. I knew exactly who was behind this. His wife, Jessica, had been pushing me out for years, bit by bit, and I had just let it happen. But not this time. This was different. I wasn't going to let her win. I decided right then and there, I was going to that dinner, and every single lie she had ever told was coming out with me. To really get why that text was the final straw, you have to know what the last few years have been like. When Mark first introduced me to Jessica, I was so happy for him. She was charming, beautiful, and he was clearly head over heels. I welcomed her with open arms. Honestly, I treated her like the daughter I never had. But it didn't take long to see the cracks in that perfect mask. It started small. Little comments here and there, just passive-aggressive enough to make me feel like I was going crazy. She'd say how much she loved my cooking, then mention a restaurant that did it so much better. She'd ask for my advice, then do the complete opposite and somehow make it sound like my idea was ridiculous. I just tried to brush it off. I told myself I was being too sensitive, that she was just getting used to the family. But it just kept happening, and each time it was a little more obvious. She was driving a wedge between me and Mark, twisting my words until I sounded like some meddling, awful mother-in-law. The real turning point, though, was the house. They were struggling to pull a down payment together, and I didn't think twice. I gave them a very large amount of money, a gift, no strings attached. I was just so happy to help them build their future. I thought it would be this wonderful gesture of my love and support. Instead, Jessica turned it into a weapon. As soon as that house was theirs, her whole attitude changed. She went from passive-aggressive to just openly hostile. It was like my financial help gave her this sense of entitlement, like she suddenly held all the cards. She started controlling when I could see Mark and my own grandchildren, using them like pawns in her little games. Visits got rarer and rarer, and when I was there, the tension was so thick you couldn't breathe. Jessica made it crystal clear that I was just a guest in the house I helped buy, an outsider in my own family. And my son, he was just caught in the middle. I don't know if he was blind to it or just too scared to stand up to her. I felt like I was losing him, and I started to wonder, was it me? Did I do something to deserve this? The self-doubt was eating me alive. But that text message, in its own cruel way, was a wake-up call. I finally saw it all clearly. I'd been gaslit and manipulated for years, and it was time to take my life back. For a few hours after that text, I couldn't move. I was just paralyzed by this mix of hurt and absolute fury. I sat there in my quiet house, and the silence just made the rejection sting even more. I've spent my whole life being the giver, the fixer. I poured my heart, my soul, and my savings into my family, only to be told I wasn't welcome at the table. The sadness was just overwhelming. But as the hours passed, something inside me started to shift. The pain hardened into a cold, steady resolve. I was done being a victim. I was done letting Jessica's lies control my relationship with my son. I thought about all the times I'd bitten my tongue, all the family dinners I'd sat through with a fake smile while she was quietly tearing me down. I had let her paint me as the villain, this overbearing mother-in-law, while she played the poor, long-suffering wife. But I knew the truth. I knew about the money I'd given, the checks I'd written, the countless hours I'd spent babysitting so they could have a life. I decided right then and there, I'm not being erased from my own family. I was going to that dinner. This wasn't about making a scene or getting some kind of petty revenge. This was about finally telling my side of the story, about speaking the truth in a room full of people who had only ever heard her version. I wasn't going to scream or yell. I was just going to arm myself with the facts and let them do the talking. I sat there and replayed every single lie, every bit of manipulation, every time she made me feel small. I knew it would be one of the hardest things I'd ever have to do, but I had to. My dignity was on the line. I pulled up to the house I helped them buy, and my heart was just pounding. I could hear them all laughing inside, and it was such a sharp contrast to the storm that was brewing in me. I took a deep breath, pulled my shoulders back, and rang the doorbell. Mark opened the door, and his face went white. Over his shoulder, I could see Jessica, and her eyes were just wide with shock and fury. The chatter inside the house just stopped. Everyone was staring at me. "What are you doing here?" Jessica hissed, her voice like poison. "I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop by," I said. My voice was surprisingly calm and steady, the total opposite of how I felt. I walked right past her into the living room, where the rest of her family was looking on with a mix of confusion and discomfort. I took a seat on the couch. The silence was deafening. Jessica was shooting daggers at me from across the room, and Mark just stood there, looking completely helpless. Finally, her dad, who I'd always found to be a pretty reasonable guy, broke the silence. "It's good to see you," he said, his voice a little shaky. "We were just about to sit down for dinner." "That's lovely," I replied, keeping my voice even. I wouldn't want to intrude on a family dinner. I looked right at Jessica when I said it, and I saw a flash of panic in her eyes. As they all moved to the dining room, I just stayed on the couch. Mark came over, whispering, "Mom, what are you doing? You can't be here." "Why not, Mark?" I asked, my voice just as quiet. "Why am I not welcome in the home I helped you buy? Why can't I see my own grandkids?" He didn't have an answer. He just stood there, his eyes filled with guilt and fear. It was during dessert that I made my move. Jessica was in the middle of telling this grand story about how she'd single-handedly saved up for the house. It was a beautiful story, and a complete and utter lie. I let her finish, and then I cleared my throat. "That's a wonderful story, Jessica," I said, my voice carrying across the now silent room. "But it's not exactly the truth, is it?" Every single eye was on me. Jessica's face was a mask of pure rage. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said through gritted teeth. "Don't you?" I shot back, still calm. "Because I think you forgot about the $120,000 gift I gave you for the down payment. The gift that had no strings attached, except maybe expecting a little kindness and respect in return." You could have heard a pin drop. Jessica's parents were just staring at her, their mouths hanging open. Mark looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. "And what about all the vacations you've taken?" I kept going, my voice getting stronger. "The designer clothes you've bought, all while telling me how much you were struggling?" "I have the bank statements, Jessica. I have all the proof. I didn't even need to show them." The look on her face said it all. Her entire tower of lies was crumbling down right in front of everyone. Have you ever been stuck between keeping the peace and just having to stand up for yourself? It's an impossible position to be in, and I'd really love to hear your stories about how you handled it. Drop a comment below and let me know. And hey, if you liked this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more. The rest of that evening was a total blur of quiet whispers and people avoiding eye contact. Jessica's family left pretty quickly after my little speech, their polite goodbyes feeling pretty hollow after all the drama. Mark and Jessica disappeared into their room, and I was left alone in the living room. The silence was actually a relief. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't called her names. I just told the truth. And it turns out, the truth is a lot more powerful than any lie. In the days that followed, things got messy, as you can imagine. Jessica, not surprisingly, refused to speak to me. Honestly, it was a blessing. Mark, though, started calling. At first, he was angry, accusing me of ruining everything. But after a few weeks, his tone started to change. He started asking questions. He wanted to know more about what I'd said. He had been so wrapped up in Jessica's world that he never really stopped to think about my side of the story. Our relationship is still a work in progress, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm getting my son back. He's starting to see his wife for who she really is, and he's finally putting up some boundaries. I don't know what will happen to them as a couple, but I know I did the right thing. I got my dignity back. I found my voice. And I learned something really important. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to stop enabling bad behavior. I had to let go of the idea that I could buy my family's love or respect. I had to learn to love myself enough to demand better. My revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about healing myself. And that's the best victory I could ask for.